Major spoilers for the Luna 1 Not Cry Archon quests, and minor spoilers for the Luna 1 World quests. If you haven't completed these, click off now, you have been warned. So I have a theory, which is obvious because why else would I be here? Rerir might either be part moon or will become part of the moon. Kind of. This theory started when I was looking into Reed Miller, the guy who apparently founded the Treasure Hoarders, and he seems to have some weird similarities to Parsifal from Mondstadt's aristocratic age. And coincidentally, I had been researching Parsifal in depth fairly recently since my last video about San Jorne also included him. The thing is, Reed Miller apparently stole an artifact that might have been able to bestow riches and eternal life, like the Philosopher's Stone and the Holy Grail. And speaking of the Philosopher's Stone, it was said to be created through alchemy, which reminds me of Albedo. And wouldn't you know, Albedo created Durin's body using parts of Bakunawa. Bakunawa is similar to Rerir in the sense that both were torn to pieces and both seemingly can't die. So it was then that I wondered if parts of Rerir might have been used or will be used to create someone or something, and that someone or something could be Columbina and or the new moon. I am not saying that Columbina is Rerir's child biologically, but that parts of Rerir's body or power was used to create Columbina, or will be used to complete her ascension as a new moon. Because the Song of the Welcome Moon event says a new moon will rise, which I assume means that Columbina still has some ascending to do. She also wants to return to the moon as well, so that seems to track. Parts of Columbina is also magenta-y red, which is a similar color to the Wild Hunt. But anyway, before I get ahead of myself, let me walk you through this idea and some interesting connections that could support it. So it seems to me that Rerir parallels the Moon Sisters in a weird way, at least the Eternal Moon, since it shattered and fell to the earth like stardust, meaning that the Eternal Moon, too, is scattered around Nod Cry. Rerir is also, or was also, scattered around Nod Cry, since his fragments take the form of the Wild Hunt, while the Moon fragments have resulted in the presence of Kuvaki. Rerir is also bandaged, which is likely because he was torn apart, right? So he has been bandaged together. The statue of Columbina is also covered in bandages, maybe because the moons were also torn apart. And Columbina, as a newly born moon goddess, might also be a moon pieced back together, which also makes the moon like Bakunawa. So both the moons and Rerir seem similar to the Bakunawa in the sense that both can be torn apart and eventually reborn. It makes me think that Rerir could have also gotten this power from the moons, potentially. Because Rerir was able to absorb Kuvaki, right? And it was established that whatever side was stronger would absorb the other. That's how he was able to absorb it in the first place. So it seems that Rerir's power and the power of the moon have some sort of synergy with each other. But alternatively, I wonder if the moon might have taken Rerir's power as a sinner away from him, since the reverse can also be true. Perhaps Kuvaki, or the moon, can absorb the abyssal energy of the Wild Hunt if Kuvaki is the stronger power. They were using Kuvaki to eliminate the Wild Hunt after all, and it was said that Rerir fell into the moon's reflection, whatever that means. Both possibilities might even be true. This would make it very similar to the story of Reed Miller. In the adventures of Reed Miller, the thief, he steals back the Santho mill from a Snezhnayan governor. It originally belonged to the Frostmoon Scions, and Reed Miller would steal it back and return it to them, allegedly. So maybe Rerir did get part of his powers from the moon, and then the moon took some of it back. And maybe that means that Rerir was used to create Columbina and will also be used to complete her ascension. Maybe part of him was used when she was first born, but not all the moon's power was taken back. So we might need to steal back the remaining power from Rerir in order to complete her ascension. Maybe. In Chinese religions, Chang'e was the goddess of the moon, but she wasn't always a goddess. Her husband, who was a great archer, was a mortal who would be gifted an immortality pill from the heavens. In some variations, they planned to take the pill together so they could both ascend. But either way, things happened, and Chang'e ends up taking the pill alone and descending to the moon. In some variations, her husband would try and shoot her down, so In a sense, he hunted the moon, which is kind of like how Rerir is obsessed with the moon and leads the wild hunt. The idea of an immortality pill also feels very similar to the immortality that can be granted by the Philosopher's Stone and the Holy Grail as well. Just keep this in mind because I do think it's relevant, and I will explain why later in the video. Anyway, you could say that this immortality pill was also stolen, kind of, since his wife took it, even though it was originally meant for him, which could mirror Rerir if his power was also stolen or taken by the moon somehow. In some variations, the husband of Cheng-Er was named Wu Gong, and in those variations, Wu Gong constantly cuts wood in the mortal realm for his wife, the moon goddess. Please forgive me for butchering all these names. I only speak English. I am trying my best. Anyway, Wu Gong is also known in some myth for endlessly cutting down a self-healing osmanthus tree on the moon, which has led him to be called the Chinese Sisyphus. Sisyphus is a figure from Greek myth who constantly cheated death, which earned him eternal punishment in the underworld when he does eventually die of old age. And this whole idea of Sisyphus cheating death makes him very similar to Rerir, since Rerir is the blasphemy of death who can't die. The whole cutting of a tree is interesting as well, since Rerir's weapon, Barnstalker, is named after a tree in Norse myth that Sigmund pulled a sword out of, Sigmund being the grandson of the Rerir in the Norse myth. There are theories that this tree, Barnstalker, is symbolic of marriage. Other theories propose that this tree might be linked to the apple that Rerir received that allowed the conception of his child. So Barnstalker might be something like a guardian tree for Rerir's child. And just as a fun side note, moon rabbits are a thing in many mythologies, and Cheng-Er was said to have a moon rabbit as a familiar. And the Luanatar do just look like moon rabbits, which I think is cute. In Norse myth, Rerir's wife's pregnancy was weirdly long, 6 years long. And you could say Columbina also took a long time to be born or reborn after the original frost moon goddess died. Anyway, Columbina was also presumably born 500 years ago, so around the same time as the Cataclysm. Presumably around the same time that Rerir also must have become the way he is, I assume. This seems to be around the same time that the Dark Calamity happened, and around the same time that the Wild Hunt first started appearing. The thing is, when Anefa is first telling us about the Wild Hunt at the beginning of the Nordcry main questline, she says that the first thing people saw in the fog was a woman. This has been bugging me. It's a very specific thing to point out at the start of the main quest, of all things. I cannot help but wonder if this woman might have been a phantom of the old Frost Moon goddess somehow. Columbina does seem to remember hearing someone singing her lullaby when she was born. So all these events, Rerir gaining power and being torn apart and falling into the moon's reflection, the Cataclysm, the Dark Calamity, and Columbina's birth, seems to maybe have occurred all around the same time, roughly, which is very suspicious. But of course there's also the other side to this theory, that parts of Rerir's body will be used to help Columbina ascend. As I mentioned, Rerir seems to be similar to the Bakunawa, both torn to pieces, both can't die, and Bakunawa comes from a myth from the Philippines where he is a moon-eating dragon, which is similar to Rerir, who also is obsessed with the moon and leads the wild hunt, so you could say he hunts the moon. He also absorbed Kuvaki, which is an energy from the moon, so in a sense he does also devour the moon, its energy at least. And parts of the Bakunawa was used to create Durin, so I wonder if parts of Rerir will be used to create something as well. The story of Cheng-Er could also work here as well, since after all, it is only after Cheng-Er takes her husband's immortality pill that she ascends to the moon. And perhaps Columbina too will need something from Rerir to complete her ascension. Whether or not that something originally belonged to the moons or not, who knows? So a piece of Bakunawa's body was needed to counteract the corrosive nature of the dragon Durin's venom. This is when Albedo was creating Durin's new form. This is interesting because in Norse mythology, Loki was a shapeshifter trickster god who was imprisoned for killing the god Balder. He would be bound by the entrails of his son and have the venom of a snake drip onto him for all eternity. Well, at least until Ragnarok rolls around and he breaks free. Rerir is similar to Bakunawa, as we established, and he also was able to shapeshift, like Loki. I don't know if he still can, since Rerir has a physical form now, but he was able to at one point at least. Loki also has a son named Fenrir, who is a wolf, and a grandson, Hati, who is also a wolf. Hati is prophesied to devour the moon during Ragnarok, so Hati is a moon-devouring wolf, like Bakunawa is a moon-devouring dragon, and how Rerir kind of hunts the moon. Hati's brother, Skoll, is also prophesied to devour the sun. Some scholars believe that Fenrir, Hati, and Skoll might all actually be the same wolf as well. I'm not sure who I should equate Rerir with here, since he seems to have similarities to both Loki and Hati. Loki, as I mentioned, is a shapeshifter and was imprisoned, and Hati was a wolf who wanted to devour the moon, like how Rerir also seems fixated on devouring moon power at least. I think it's possible that Genshin combines aspects of both characters into Rerir, but of course I can't know for sure. But wolves are interesting because you have werewolves who are also shapeshifters, and even in Little Red Riding Hood we have a wolf who disguised himself as Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother. Wolves are also associated with hunting, and Rerir also leads the wild hunt. So Rerir does seem very wolf-like, allegorically at least. He does seem to have wolf-like claws. Here's the thing, in Genshin, wolves are said to be the children of the moon, which again, Rerir isn't literally a wolf as far as I know, but it makes me wonder if he is from the Crimson Moon dynasty of Conrir, which could be another reason why he acts like the moon marrow belongs to him. If the Crimson Moon bloodline did have powers given to them by the Crimson Moon, it might make sense that he feels a kind of ownership over moon-related powers and items. Sure, it's arrogant, but as a sinner, that kind of tracks. Arlecchino's powers from the Crimson Moon dynasty was also said to be corrosive in nature, and this again feels similar to the corrosive nature of Durin's venom and the snake venom that tortured Loki in the Norse myth. But what this means for Rerir, I can't be sure. Maybe he too is tortured by the bloodline of the Crimson Moon. Since Arlecchino's blood was able to erase memories, I wonder if this venom in Genshin's case doesn't necessarily erode the physical form, but memories, and perhaps even the soul. And Arlecchino's blackened limbs seem to progress as she uses her powers, so perhaps it is also eating away at her soul, or her memories. And maybe that's why Rerir seems so emotionally unstable. I mean, sure, he was torn apart, and I am sure that would be more than enough to drive someone mad, but the corrosive effects of the Crimson Moon bloodline could have added fuel to that fire. But get it? Because Arlecchino has fire powers. But anyway, Rerir could also share a connection with someone else who might also be from the Crimson Moon dynasty. You see, the character Myr in the Legend of the Shattered Halberd book series loses an eye for a time and wants to restore his family name. What's interesting about Myr in the Shattered Halberd series is that his last name is Mi. Chinese names tend to put the surname first, so his name is Myr, which is basically the name of Mimir, who is a figure from Norse mythology. Mimir is a figure associated with Mimmisbrunna, one of the 3 wells or springs located under Yggdrasil. Odin sacrificed an eye to this well for wisdom, which tracks, but also reminds me of the one-eyed king of Conrir and how the Crimson Moon was also said to have a singular eye. So to me, the Crimson Moon and its dynasty and this well in Norse mythology do seem to be related. I think there's a possibility that these 3 wells in Norse myth correlate to the 3 moons we have in Genshin. This seems even more likely when you remember the fact that in Enkanomiya, in order to be able to access the portals to each realm, you had to go to those 3 pools. Rerir also fell into the moon's reflection. A pool of water can reflect the moon, so perhaps these pools are not necessarily moons in Genshin. Perhaps in Genshin these pools of water do exist, and are special places that are connected to the moons in some way. Which kind of makes me think of that weird fountain in the chasm that somehow relieved the suffering of the cursed Conrians. But anyway, if these pools exist, then Rerir might have fallen into one when he fell into the moon's reflection. In Norse mythology, Mimir was also said to be the guardian of this world. So I wonder, if Myrrh in the Shattered Halberd series is based off of a real person in Teyvat, then maybe it was someone from the Crimson Moon Dynasty. Anyway, apparently Mimir in Norse mythology also got decapitated at one point, and Odin would carry around Mimir's head. The head would give him wisdom and advice. Which is interesting because Rerir also couldn't die even after he had been torn to pieces. Revir's spear, Barnstalker, is also named after a tree in Norse myth that some scholars believe to be another name for Yggdrasil, possibly. And the spring, or well, was located under the world tree in Norse mythology. Conria is also underground, so it makes sense that if these pools do exist somewhere in Genshin, it could be near Conria. So Rerir could have taken power from the moons. Even if he didn't, Rerir as one of the 5 sinners would have taken power from our siblings, since the 5 sinners divided up the Great Abyssal Power, remember? So either way, Rerir has taken power that didn't originally belong to him, which makes him a thief, kind of. Also, thieves tend to disguise themselves. Reed Miller did at least on a few occasions, apparently. And Rerir is able to shapeshift, which is also kind of like a disguise, which makes him similar to the thief Reed Miller and Parsifal, who stole the Sampo Mill and the Sapphire respectively. So Reed Miller apparently was the founder of the Treasure Hoarders, based on text and interactions in-game. It seems that he stole something from a governor of Snezhnaya called the Sampo Mill. This seems to have been a great artifact of some sort that the governor might have stolen from the Frostmoon Scions initially, but anyway. Sampo is a magical object or device in Finnish mythology that brings riches or good fortune to the beholder. Forgive me for butchering all these names in this video, but in the Kalevala, a compilation of epic poetry, the Sampo is a type of mill that can apparently make flour, salt, and gold. Speaking of things that can create gold, the Philosopher's Stone was also said to be a legendary object that could create gold, as well as creating an elixir of life. Which brings us back to Parsifal. As established, Mondstadt Parsifal seems to have some similarities with Reed Miller, and Mondstadt Parsifal was named after the figure Parsifal from the Arthurian legend who was on a quest for the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail as well was said to be able to bestow a type of immortality. In the German variant of Parsifal, the Holy Grail is said to be a gemstone, and wouldn't you know that Parsifal in Genshin was from Mondstadt, which seems to be loosely based on Germany. Parsifal of Mondstadt also stole that sapphire that he gave to Josephine, the blue-eyed witch. And in one of the text descriptions that mention Reed Miller, it also mentions Immortal Thieves. Rerir is basically immortal as well, so he is an immortal thief. See, in my last video, I also touched on the fact that in Heart's Desire, it was implied that Josephine Sapphire could have developed something like a soul over time. Zhongli's second story quest did tell us that rocks can hold memories. And souls and memories could be the same thing, kind of, at least in Genshin. If they aren't the same thing, they are at least deeply connected. So stones can hold a form of life, and perhaps that's what makes these stones a form of the Holy Grail or the Philosopher's Stone, because if your memories and therefore a version of yourself can be stored in a stone, could you say that at least a version of you has been given eternal life? So in that sense, Josephine's sapphire, the one stolen and given to her by Parsifal, is a form of eternal life. Weirdly enough, one of Lauma's voice lines when you open a treasure chest is this.
Perhaps this treasure has been waiting for you all along.
Which to me feels like weird phrasing, as if the treasure is sentient, which could actually be the case. At least some of the time. In the tale of Reed Miller, it is said that he ended up kidnapping the governor's daughter, Leonita, since she was apparently the real treasure that somehow gave the governor all his riches and fortune. So weirdly, Leonita might have also been a philosopher's stone, allegorically at least. And in an earlier volume, they said Reed Miller stole Leonita's heart. The name Leonita is also interesting for several reasons. For one, it is similar to leonite, which is a mineral and might have been used to make a form of potable gold in 300 AD China. Weirdly similar to the Philosopher's Stone, which was also said to make gold. So it seems like in Genshin, the Holy Grail or the Philosopher's Stone might not be something that grants eternal life necessarily, but it could be the point at which eternal life is achieved. When you become the Philosopher's Stone or the Holy Grail allegorically in Genshin, it might just mean that you have achieved some sort of eternal life. Maybe by having your soul or a version of your soul and memories stored in a stone. Maybe storing memories this way also makes it immune to the tampering of Irminsul, which in Genshin would be the truest form of eternal life, maybe. The ability to always be eternally remembered without outside interference. Which makes me wonder if the Sampo Mill that Reed Miller stole might have been the Moon Marrow, since the Moon Marrow also seems similar to a crystalline soul, since it's the core of the dead Moon Aria and seems to have some of her memories. Which reminds me of Rerir, because Rerir also had a gemstone heart, since, Flynn's collected those stones that snapped together, and he hid it in his lantern, and apparently it turned out to be Rerir's heart, which we purified. Whoops. So let's wrap up with a quick summary and conclusion. Rerir might have either stolen power from the moons, or had his power stolen or returned to the moons. Rerir's body and or powers might have also been used to create Columbina and or might be used to fully ascend her as the new moon of Tevat. This is because he is similar to Bakunawa, which was used to create Durin, and Kuvaki and Rerir's power seems to be able to absorb each other. Rerir might mirror the thieves Parsifal and Reed Miller, since he also might have stolen treasure from the moons. Their power and this treasure might be similar in concept to the Philosopher's Stone, Holy Grail, and the Sampo Mill, treasures that are claimed to give eternal life and or gold. Rerir is unable to die, and his pieces slowly come back over the years in order for him to be reborn, basically. And the moons also might be similar in the sense that they also got torn to pieces, and a moon goddess was eventually reborn, which is why we have Columbina. I am tempted to harp on about Sanjone again, since I also connected her with Josephine Sapphire, a possible reference to the Holy Grail in Genshin, but again, I have already made a video on that. The one concept I would like to add from that video is the idea of two parts of the self. If Columbina is partly made up of Rerir, or vice versa, or whether she needs Rerir to ascend, you could say that Rerir is part of herself. Or maybe that Rerir and the Wild Hunt and the moon are both two sides of the same coin, even. But anyway, that's about it. I wanted to make this a short one, but I kept digging up more mythological references I wanted to throw in, so hopefully it's understandable. Anyway, hope you had fun at least. Like if you liked, don't if you didn't. I'm gonna go sleep now. See ya.